Time now for a special Euros edition of Back Pages tonight, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Delighted to say that joining us tonight are the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein and Martyn Ziegler, chief sports reporter for The Times. Welcome along to you both. Thanks very much for joining us straight after the big match. And we're going to get straight to this story from The Telegraph. Hey Jude, Bellingham wins it. We showed it to you just a few moments ago. Picture of his celebration alongside Kieran Trippier, Declan Rice in the background. Midfielder's crashing header gets England's tournament up and running. Martyn, I'll come to you first on this one. Was that it? Was Jude Bellingham the difference between the two sides in a very tight match?
He was certainly the best player on the pitch, and I think by a fairly long way. I mean, I was a bit concerned he was going to be exhausted after his very long season playing in the Champions League final, when he did look a bit leggy then, but he's clearly had a couple of weeks off and he was absolutely revitalised. I thought he was brilliant. I mean, in every facet really. Physically really strong, very, very good on the ball, visionary, and that brilliant header. Yeah,
David, what was your take on Bellingham's performance? He seemed to be everywhere on the pitch last night or this night.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. He's cut from a different cloth, Jude Bellingham. We know he's a generational talent. We know he's already on the path towards greatness, winning Champions League just recently, playing for the mighty Real Madrid. And the way he wanted the ball and was eager to be the main man, it sort of was reminiscent of a young Wayne Rooney bursting onto the scene many years ago, and the hunger with which he wanted to drive the team forward and lead by example in attack with the goal, in midfield, in defence, the swagger he had, the way he was prepared to take it to the opposition, serenaded by the crowd. I've said it before on this programme, he's such an old head on young shoulders. And you just want to see him get better and better as the tournament goes on. Martyn points out, obviously, a bit of fatigue coming into this tournament. He's also been carrying a shoulder injury for quite a long time. He was on the end of a couple of rough challenges as well tonight. But his body is built so robustly by the looks of it that he's the sort of player that England are going to build their team around for many years to come. He's part of the leadership group already. Gareth Southgate wanted him to inspire some of the younger players by being just 20 years old and already in that select group, and yeah, it bodes really well. He was the standout performer in what was an interesting night. It was a very positive result, but there's a lot that we can pick through.
Before we get onto the overall performance, Martyn, there's lots of places you can play Jude Bellingham, really. I mean, you could play him as a number 8, couldn't you? There are lots of number 10 options, but did tonight vindicate the decision to play him as a number 10?
Yeah, I think so. I think that is his best place for him. It is for Real Madrid. And I just think, you know, when you've got that sort of talent, you have to play him in his best role. There may be other players who, for example, Phil Foden didn't look too comfortable out on the left, and he likes playing in that position as well. And, you know, do you accommodate him by moving Bellingham? I think no. And I think that showed tonight that you don't. You have to play him there.
All right, let's have a look at the Eye as well. Their headline is shaky start. So a slightly different take to the Telegraph. And David, how are we to look at this performance? Because it was a tale of two halves, wasn't it, really? The first half, England were pretty dominant. They looked very dangerous down the right. And then the second half, all of a sudden, Serbia had a lot more of the ball, and it was all hands on deck in terms of defending. So overall, in the round, how are we to look at this opening performance?
Well, the first half, especially for the most part of the first half, it got a little bit edgy towards half-time, but the majority of it was very commanding, authoritative. I thought England looked great physically, in fine fettle, and tactically they'd been set up well. Positionally, it looked like a team that knows they're one of the favourites for this tournament. They've been together a long time, despite having some younger players and some newer faces in the group. And they took it to Serbia quite well. I did sort of gain a feeling when after that excellent opening goal from Jude Bellingham, the way England took the pace out of it a little bit and started looking like they weren't quite going for the kill in a way that many of us want to see, that this could come back to haunt them later, because at this level you really need to see off opponents like that. And that's where you flip into the second half, and there are reasons to be concerned in terms of maybe the substitutions, in terms of the fact that England allowed Serbia to get back into it, and really there were moments that were very squeaky, and against better opposition you imagine England might have been punished. Now at the same time, you've got to say England before Gareth Southgate didn't used to do well in their opening matches of major tournaments. Under him they have, and they've continued that. And I remember Clive Woodward when England won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. Just get the results. It doesn't matter how they come. But of course, with English football, we want to see the style as well. We've got such good players that have the capabilities of doing so. And definitely on the substitutions, would have liked to see some more proactive steps rather than perhaps a bit more conservative and defensive. But they got through, and on the same day that the other teams in their group drew. And so England are now in a commanding position, and they'll need to step up their performance against Denmark.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at your paper, Martyn. And the Times also focuses on Jude Bellingham. Bellingham in a class of his own. But I want to get your thoughts, on the overall performance as well. Do you think England defended better than they attacked today? A lot of questions over the defence, but Mark Guehi in particular had a very good game.
Yeah, I thought he was absolutely superb, actually, because coming into this game, he perhaps had been somebody people didn't know much about, unless you were sort of followed Crystal Palace closely. But I thought he was absolutely excellent, and certainly just behind Bellingham in terms of the ratings for the match. I actually think England should have been a bit more clinical, perhaps. I know Harry Kane had one that hit the crossbar, but there were a couple of Kyle Walker. I think he would have been very disappointed didn't make more of his clear chance. There were a couple of others, so I think they could be more clinical in their finishing. I think, but actually, I thought they defended brilliantly. I think they had one shot on target, Serbia, and when you look at the actual match stats, I think England will be quite pleased with those. I think actually Southgate will be perhaps less happy with what happened in terms of finishing off the chances that they had. If you were any other team, Italy, Spain, you think this was a job well done. You wouldn't be too fussed about the fact that you conceded a bit of possession, a bit of territory to Serbia in the second half. You just think, we held our own, we did the job, and we got the result, and that's all that matters.
I mean, a lot of the papers are focusing on Bellingham, as you would imagine. He scored the only goal. The Express is no different as well. Let's have a look at their headline. So far, so Jude. So all of these headlines really just expressing the fact that, England did the job really through Bellingham tonight. But how about his midfield partner? Because at the start of the game, a lot of the focus was on Trent Alexander-Arnold playing in midfield. He got taken off midway through the second half. He was fairly influential in the first half. Can we look at that as a success or not?
I think that was going to be the talking point after this match, Matt. Whatever happened, did Trent Alexander-Arnold do well or not so well? Because he was the only real selection dilemma. Was it going to be him or Conor Gallagher? And I think many people have been asking for Gareth Southgate to try Trent Alexander-Arnold in this position, which he's very new to. He's barely played there for club or country. And so, as Sam Wallace writes in The Telegraph, it's a position and a decision that comes with risk and also some reward too. And so there were some moments that he will learn from in terms of possession and positionally, but also he's got special qualities that many of us want to see from England in terms of his vision, his distribution. And for the moments that were maybe not so good tonight, he made up for them really well. Some interceptions, some starting of the counter-attacks. And you'd like to think that he would grow into this tournament. And as Sam finishes his piece with, he should be retained for Thursday as well. And you know, I think Trent Alexander-Arnold is the sort of player that the spark, the ability to do something that would light up a major tournament, and is the sort of thing that England are maybe looking for. So yeah, I thought he, on the whole, did pretty well for this first performance against very tough opposition. We shouldn't underestimate Serbia. They beat Sweden 3-0 in their last warm-up match. And he forms a good partnership with Declan Rice. And obviously, you got Jude Bellingham in there as well. You've got the option of Conor Gallagher. He came on, Kobbie Mainoo too, but maybe that's a bit defensive. And we've got so many players in the England squad who could bring some excitement to this team in this tournament. So I think Trent Alexander on the whole did pretty well, to be fair.
Yeah, so that is on your screen there. That is Sam Wallace's article inside the Telegraph. Alexander-Arnold was a big risk, but it was the right call. Martyn, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I generally do. I mean, there are a couple of things he gave the ball away, which Mitrovic nearly scored from. Put it wide. I think that was just a little bit of an error there. But I think going forward, generally, he was a very positive force, and he did make some interceptions as well. So, you know, he is a fullback naturally for Liverpool. So he does have that defensive side to his game too, as well as this, his amazing passing ability, which we saw some of as well. I actually think he will get better and better as the tournament goes on, and I very much think he should be kept in that position.
Yeah, well, OK, that's interesting. David, I'll come to you then, because there is a train of thought, isn't there, that when we come up against more offensive sides, maybe Conor Gallagher should play in midfield alongside Declan Rice and not Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's better used to sides that sit deep. Do you go along with that train of thought?
Maybe, but I'm not sure England even have the most natural defensive midfielder in their squad. Declan Rice is not sort of the type of player that plays there all the time for Arsenal. He's pushed further forward and looked quite natural in the 8. You've got Jude Bellingham, as you've talked about, sort of the 8 and even the 10, as Martyn said he took so well to, even though he can get back defensively. And Conor Gallagher is not a defender. I mean, he's an industrious player that gets around the park and he tries to create. And as we've seen for Chelsea, has a bit of a penchant for scoring goals too. So you could say Kobbie Mainoo, but and it was great that he got on tonight. And I think that's a good step from Southgate to get some minutes under his belt. In a remarkable rise for Manchester United and England. But he's still very young, and this is a new stage for him. And so as the tournament gets more serious, I'm not sure that he would be your sort of starting option. So there will be a lot of focus on Conor Gallagher, but there was a bit of a sense that when those players came on, maybe England retreated into their shell and were a bit too compact and invited Serbia on. The likes of Dusan Tadic were on by that point and trying to do things slightly differently. So I don't know, it's the proactive steps, the sort of players who can retain the ball, who can get on England on the front foot and take the game to the opposition that we see from many of these other nations that work out so well. And so that's where Trent Alexander-Arnold maybe holds some favour in that he's a forward-thinking player. And we all seem to agree that England's best chance at this tournament is to rely on their forward players to maybe mitigate some of the weakness through injury and lack of availability on the defensive side. So, no, I think he should retain his place and most likely will.
OK, thank you very much, guys, for the time being. Very positive start for England at the Euros. They've won their first game against Serbia. Stay with us. Lots more to come. Welcome back. You are watching Back Pages tonight. And welcome back to Martyn Ziegler, Chief Sports Reporter for The Times, and the Athletics football correspondent, David Ornstein. Right, we are now going to talk about Scotland, gentlemen, which is quite handy because I know, Martyn, you were at the game the other day, the 5-1 humbling by Germany. And Steve Clarke has actually taken responsibility in some ways for the defeat and the manner of the defeat, hasn't he? If we have a look at this here, Clarke, I clouded the players' minds for Germany thrashing. What do you make of the way that Steve Clarke has tried to deflect the attention away from his side's performance in some ways?
Yeah, well, I mean, he was very, not surprisingly, very sort of grumpy after the match. And I pointed out in the post-match press conference, Scotland didn't have a single shot at all on goal, despite the fact they managed to score or have a goal in their favour via an own goal. And he was very put out. He seemed quite put out by that, but he wasn't blaming the players. He said we know we're better than this, and I'm not surprised he's sort of taken it on the chin himself to try and take some of the pressure off them. And I think he's saying that he basically overcomplicated things, gave them too much information about what he wanted them to do, and instead of keeping it simple, and he's going to change things for the next match. And I think that's probably good managerial tactics, to be honest.
Yeah, Sam Dean with that in the Telegraph in terms of clouding the players' minds. He's got a big job on his hands, though, hasn't he, David, to turn that around. That was about as poor a performance as they could have hoped for in their first game.
Yeah, it was a real lowlight of the tournament so far, unfortunately, for Scotland. And it doesn't get any easier because they've got, well, it should get a little easier, but not much, because it's Switzerland who are on form. And then even Hungary, and we've seen their quality, and Dominic Szoboszlai in there, if he can up his level a little bit to it. It's not going to be easy for Scotland to qualify now. Of course, second place and maybe some third places too gives them hope. But that was a bruising first defeat, and losing Ryan Porteous to the red card. Injuries coming into the tournament. There was even concern on Andy Robertson on the eve of the tournament. And it's not been plain sailing at all so far. Look, he's done a magnificent job, Steve Clarke, in getting Scotland to this point, and they're going to go down fighting whatever happens, and their fans will be right behind them. Quite incredible, the support that they give Scotland. But it was a bitterly disappointing start, and you start to look around the team for where they can pick up against a team of Switzerland's quality, led by Granit Xhaka, and it's going to be really tough. So yeah, it's not looking the best for them.
Well, Sam Dean was also actually in Stuttgart for the other game in Group C, England's group, Slovenia against Denmark. He's written about that too. Janza spoils Eriksson movie script is the headline he goes with. And that's kind of spot on, really, isn't it, Martyn? Because we were heading for a fantastic story had Christian Eriksen scored the winner there for Denmark.
Yeah, because of course it was in the Euros when he collapsed on the pitch, and with his heart, had a heart attack. So for him to have come back and scored this really excellent goal, it was looking like a fairy tale. But Slovenia weren't gonna have it end that way, and actually they look very strong. Got a couple of really powerful strikers up front, and Eriksson, I think he accepted that Slovenia did enough to deserve that draw, and it's going to be wide open now. As David said, if you finish in third place, you can still qualify. So even though Serbia lost to England, it's by no means the end of their story, and they can be very, very hopeful that they can pull one off, because actually a draw would have been the best result for them, playing against both of those teams left to come.
David, it seems as though the so-called bigger sides have all started out pretty well, or started with wins in this tournament. Netherlands managed to get a late win against Poland earlier, 2-1, with Wout Weghorst getting the winner, formerly of Manchester United. He's still actually on Burnley's books, isn't he, Wout Weghorst? But what did you make of the Dutch?
Yeah, the Dutch, they've been unpredictable at major tournaments in recent years, but we know they've got quality there. And actually, Weghorst is becoming a bit of a major tournament hero for the Dutch. I was out in Qatar. I interviewed him after some of his heroics there, and he's sort of being a bit of a standard bearer for them. They're going to need to up their quality, and they've got it within their ranks. And as England have showed tonight, and Martyn pointed out, you just got to get the wins now. Italy came from a goal down the holders. That would have been a big upset if they hadn't done so. It was only really, obviously, Germany and Spain who were commanding in their victories. But it puts the bigger teams in good shape. But yeah, there are threats. I mean, a word for Benjamin Sesko of Slovenia today. A couple of shots that could have scored sort of goal of the tournament contenders in the opening few days. And so it's not going to be easy. England have got them in their final group game So that there are threats wherever you look, and that's why the big teams at this point, that you can't take right off the ball, and you just can't underestimate the importance of just getting those points on the board and getting through to the knockout stage, which is why I think we need to keep a bit of the England analysis in perspective, because they've done what they needed to do.
Right, we've just got a couple of minutes left, gents, but I want to go back to England, finish with England, and go back to the Telegraph as well, because Mike McGrath's player ratings make interesting viewing in the Telegraph. Everyone gets 7s, 8s or 9s for Bellingham. The two lowest scores, Martyn, Harry Kane and Phil Foden, who both get a 6. Now, Foden, of course, playing on the left, and from that evidence, it didn't really seem to suit him.
No, actually, I think that's slightly harsh. I think Kane actually did all right. I mean, he didn't get... It wasn't as though the ball was being played to him and he wasn't controlling it. I actually think he did quite well with what he had. Won a lot of free kicks. When he got the ball, he made use of it. He had that chance, his only chance, which very nearly scored. So actually, I think probably slightly harsh. I would have marked him a little bit higher. Foden, I might even have marked a little bit lower. I thought he was pretty disappointing. Didn't use the ball nearly as well as I thought he could. Maybe it's just not his position. I mean, for Manchester City, he likes playing coming in from the right, doesn't he? So maybe it's a struggle trying to get him to adapt to that new position. So maybe it's something that's going to get better through the tournament, but it didn't look particularly comfortable for him out there.
Only about 45 seconds or so left, David, but do you think Foden was the poorest performer for England today?
Yeah, he didn't do himself justice or reach the standards we know of him, and that maybe puts his place under scrutiny for the Denmark game, especially when Anthony Gordon is so well thought of by the England coaching staff, and he does hug that left touchline so well for Newcastle United. Jared Bowen came on and created more chances than anybody else for England tonight, and so I think there's a bit of a selection dilemma there, and Phil Foden will need to up his level if he's going to retain the place in the team and deliver what we know he can.
Great talking to both of you. Thank you very much. David Ornstein and Martyn Ziegler. That was Back Pages tonight.